Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our politics panel on Indigenous leaders discussing concern over talk of separatism with King Charles. But first, the cost of aging infrastructure.
Our city is growing in an unprecedented rate, and so this problem is a problem today, but just imagine how much of a problem it's going to be in 50 years from now.
Reaction to a City of Calgary report assessing critical infrastructure priorities that pegs the 10-year capital needs price tag at $49 billion and the cost to just maintain most critical infrastructure, $7.5 billion. And Calgary Mayor Jeremy Farkas joins us now to discuss that and more. Mr. Mayor, good to see you, sir. Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks so much, Michael.
All right, well, let's start on this eye-popping report on infrastructure, $49 billion over the next decade. How do you see this changing your council's approach to tackling and prioritizing needed infrastructure?
Well, my council colleague, Councillor Chabot, has a great point. We've seen explosive growth here in the Calgary region, 100,000, 200,000 people per year coming to the Calgary region, and that's a great thing. We're on the cusp of being a city of 2 million people, but it also bears some big questions around services or infrastructure, housing, essential infrastructure like water pipes. So in that $49 billion, I think the silver lining is that a significant portion of that is growth. So if we continue to see growth in the way that we have, we're going to need that amount, but some of the number there is arguably things that are a bit more nice to have. But I can't speak for every single one of my colleagues, but I would say our Calgary City Council is very focused on the nuts and bolts, the running the city. If we had our way, we would like to be known as the Infrastructure City Council. So when you think about the costs, yes, there is a cost to address the issue, but there's always a cost. You can choose to pay modestly now, or you can pay massively later. For us, we refuse to continue passing the buck. We are tackling this head on here and now. And the silver lining is that if we actually address some of these needs here and now, there's significant savings that will be borne out in the long term. Just as an example, because I'm thinking a lot about water right now, we lose about 25% of our water due to the aging nature of our water infrastructure. So if we were to fix that up, tighten up those taps, so to speak, we could actually see some sustained savings in the long term for ratepayers.
Okay, big dollars. It goes without saying. So your read on the willingness of ratepayers to shoulder a good part of this, or is this a matter of leaning on other orders of government?
Well, it's all of the above. It's our council tightening our belts, really focusing on the need to haves versus the nice to haves. And that's what we did is we inherited about a 6% property tax increase. We shaved that down to 1.6 while still setting aside big money for things like, say, $200 million for our Bearspaw feeder main replacement, essential infrastructure, safety, and so on. Certainly, we need the assistance of the provincial and federal governments, especially as they continue to promote Calgary and Alberta as a great place to live. Look, you see a lot from the provincial government in terms of Alberta's calling. Even the Premier had set a very ambitious goal of doubling Alberta's population in a relatively short period of time. And at the municipal level here in Calgary, Edmonton, Red Deer, others, that is where that population growth is really seen. And I want Calgary to continue to be a welcoming city, but we're going to need to continue to see some support from the feds and province. And on the ratepayer piece, the good news here is that when you're thinking about, say, replacing a huge feeder main that serves more than half of the Calgary region, as is the case with our Northwest line, the good news is that you're able to spread the costs of that over the lifetime of the asset. So it's not something that you got to pay for in 10 years. It's about a 100-year timeline. So think of it more like, yes, you need to buy that house, but you have the opportunity to be able to get the mortgage and pay for it as you go.
And on the Bearspaw feeder main, maybe a quick progress report and where residents are left at the moment.
Yeah, so we have more than half of Calgary's drinking water goes through this one single water pipe, and we've had to take preventative action. We saw in 9 different locations the pipe was on the verge of failure. This is a terminally ill pipe. No amount of patchwork is going to be able to fix it, but we had to do this measure to be able to prevent what happened, say, on December 30th, where it just all of a sudden catastrophically failed. We're moving faster than anything we've ever done before to build a replacement pipe. This is usually a 4-year program. project, but everything's in place to get it done in this calendar year. So we're going to get that done in one single year. But in the next, say, 3 weeks or so, we're asking Calgarians to support our neighbors, talk to friends, family, coworkers, and so on. We're asking Calgarians to reduce water use in non-essential ways, say only flush when necessary, limit showers to 3 minutes or less, only run full loads of dishes and laundry. And the good news is we're a couple days into the conservation measures, and Calgarians have already responded in a big way. So we got to keep our foot on the gas there.
All right. Now, in the wake of the provincial budget, and you mentioned taxation a moment ago, you captured your share of headlines for pushing back against substantial property tax increases being imposed by the government. How serious are you about floating the prospect of a plebiscite? What would that accomplish?
Well, first, I just want to thank the Premier and various ministers who are engaged in supporting us through this water main crisis. We really value working in partnership with the provincial government, and certainly it's my job as the Mayor of Calgary to advocate for Calgarians. And when we saw the provincial budget show the largest provincial property tax increase in Calgary's history, almost $400 for the typical family, especially at a time when Calgarians were struggling, we had to push back on that. But it's more so about the transparency. Look, if you are giving Calgary the largest property tax increase in our history, and you're giving us the largest service increase or infrastructure increase, that's a discussion. But we're not seeing a lot of transparency in terms of how the investment is flowing back to our city. And this is on top of a 60% increase in their share that we've seen over the last 4 years. And it's further muddied in the fact that most people who pay their property taxes assume that all of that money is going to the local municipality. But in our case, it's nearly 50 cents on the dollar now that goes to the provincial government. So we did our part. We brought our tax increase down to 1.6%. And to have them throw in a 24% increase, it was a very challenging situation. So again, we understand the financial limitations, the concerns that they have with their budget, but we're asking the province to consider equity here in terms of Calgary continuing to see huge increases, say almost $400 here, less than half of that up in Edmonton. There's a fairness argument to be made there.
All right. We'll have to leave it there. Appreciate your time as always, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Wish you well.
Jeremy Farkas, Mayor of Calgary. From the issue of separatism up for discussion with King Charles to the cost of aging infrastructure in Calgary and Pierre Poilievre heading south of the border. Time now for tonight's politics panel. And joining us this evening, former MLA Karen McPherson, and Stacey Hatcher is a communications professional who has worked for Conservative leaders in Ottawa and on Conservative leadership and election campaigns here in Alberta. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with First Nations leadership meeting with King Charles at Buckingham Palace Wednesday, reaffirming relations with the Crown and raising concerns about the separatist movement in Alberta and its threat to treaty rights.
He just said, really? And I said, yes. So he's going to be meeting with Carney on Monday regarding the whole relationship between treaty and the Crown.
During their private meeting, First Nations leaders from Alberta and Saskatchewan presented the King with an invitation to Canada to mark the 150th anniversary of the signing of Treaty 6. That happens this summer. Now, Indigenous leaders have also filed court challenges against the petition for a separation referendum and have passed their own vote of non-confidence in the Alberta government. Karen, for First Nations leaders to bring King Charles into this conversation, how do you see that changing the state of dialogue and debate over this contentious issue of separation?
Well, it's obvious they felt like they weren't getting the kind of response that they wanted to see from the provincial government, either just through media or one-on-one from ministers and the Premier. So it shows that this is really important. They have very deep concerns, and that it appears that a petition to bring forward a referendum really circumvents the nation-to-nation relationship that is so important to First Nations. So it is a great show of representation on behalf of the chiefs for all First Nations in Alberta and Saskatchewan.
Stacey, given the degree of tension building here over the issue of separation, what might that mean for the state of discussions with First Nations over major projects, most notably Alberta's push for a new pipeline to the coast?
Yeah, I'm not sure that will have a direct impact. I mean, what I've experienced in terms of working in the energy sector in Alberta is that the First Nations are active and willing participants in the partnerships. I mean, they see a future for themselves being actively involved in the major projects and having a say in how those are constructed and how they run and how they're maintained. So I'm a little less clear on the impact on that side of things. But I mean, here's what I would say, and I've said this before on the program. I mean, I'm not shy about saying it. I'm a Canadian, and I'm not in favor of separation. I think that those that advocate on the separatist agenda aren't necessarily telling people the full truth. And listen, I came from the province of Quebec, so I'm very well familiar with this playbook, which is if only we separate, everything will be just fine and life will be better on the other side. And they rarely spend time talking about all the hard work and the logistics involved in actually separating a province from the country. And so, I think that the First Nations leaders have raised this to their counterparts, which is the Crown. That is who their relationship and who the treaty is signed with is the Crown. So not surprised to see them, go overseas to talk to the King about this. And the other thing I think that this illustrates again is, there's a lot I like about the provincial government, and I can agree with a lot of their decisions, but one of their weaknesses is actually consultation and stakeholder engagement, whether it's with First Nations or whether it's with other groups. And so this illustrates that Exhibit A point, if you will. It is the First Nations wouldn't feel they would have to travel across the seas if they were being heard here at home.
Well, and maybe to that point, Karen, the opposition New Democrats have made a point to say Premier Smith needs to understand separation pushback from Indigenous leaders is serious. What do you see the UCP government needing to do here?
Acknowledging, further to Stacey's point, acknowledging the concerns that the First Nations are bringing forward. You have to be pretty desperate to go to the King to voice your concerns and really feel like you're not being heard. So it really does behoove the government to make a serious overture towards First Nations to say, hey, we can tell we've dropped the ball and we really want to hear what your concerns are. Please come, and we are ready to listen and to take your concerns into consideration and to talk about that publicly.
All right, next up for us, we heard from Calgary Mayor Jeremy Farkas off the top, most notably on the new report laying out the need for nearly $50 billion in infrastructure spending over the next decade. Stacey, what do you make of the window of dialogue this report stands to open, and how much of a departure is that for Calgary City Council?
I think a few things. First, I'll say there's a lot I really respect and admire about Jeremy and how he's going about leading the city. I really appreciate his people politics, and he really does try to talk to a lot of different groups to make sure he has a lot of different perspectives. And even in your interview with the mayor, he was very quick to thank the provincial government for their support and help in other areas. And so that's important too, because the mayor of our city has to get along with the government and be able to work together on this kind of large infrastructure project. And then the second thing that I would say is in the private sector, I mean, businesses will put together a 20 to 30 year capital asset management plan. They will understand all the assets in their arsenal. They will understand their life cycle. And I'm not sure the city of Calgary, and probably no other city, but certainly I live in Calgary, and I've not seen or heard of a capital asset management plan. I've not seen or heard of a deep dive into the life cycle of our assets. So today it's water pipes, but tomorrow, what is it? And so I think council has to get into a better habit of when they are budgeting, that they have a presentation, they have information and details on the life cycle of the assets. I mean, we can't go through this again. This is an important priority for this council. And I think it's a critical challenge for this council. And so I'm looking forward to see if they're going to rise to it.
Karen, how do you see a report like this then playing into dynamics between the city as a major municipality and the provincial government? What kind of groundwork is being laid out here?
Well, I think a couple of things, making it really clear that there is a big infrastructure deficit. And, you know, a lot of that is borne on many councils over many years engaging in infrastructure maintenance deferment to the point where stuff's falling apart. So marrying that with exponential growth, the pressure on infrastructure is just really, really large and unsustainable. So that the relationship with the province is going to be one of, we really need you as a partner to make sure that this engine of economic power within the province is able to sustain growth and to keep our citizens healthy and, you know, able to be looking forward.
All right. On that note, time for us to take a bit of a break, but when we come back, Pierre Poilievre prepares to hit the road, headed for the United States. More from our politics panel in a moment. Welcome back. Pierre Poilievre is heading to the U.S. for several days of meetings.
Canada can't control every decision made in Washington, and I'll leave the negotiating up to our government. But we can leverage the goodwill and shared interests with the American people.
The Conservative leader's first stop will be in Michigan for meetings with auto sector leaders and state legislators. He'll also head to Texas to talk with energy industry executives, and later New York to speak at an event hosted by the Foreign Policy Association. Karen, this it's been identified as a tour to make the case for tariff-free trade and stand up for Canada and Canadians. What do you see the Conservative leader accomplishing here?
I think all leaders at all levels of government that can make the case for Canada with our neighbors to the south is a really good thing for our country and for the relationship between the two countries. I think establishing, you know, the benefits for both sides of the border and utilizing the government representatives within the U.S. to put the pressure on internally to resolve issues, especially around tariffs and trade, quickly and to the benefit of both parties makes a lot of sense. And I'm really happy to see him doing this.
Stacey, how does this play in the wake of Pierre Poilievre's recent trip overseas, stopping in the UK, Germany, talking trade, among other issues? What does it say about changing dynamics around his approach to foreign policy?
Well, I'm really liking it. That's the short Coles notes of it all. It's a deepening of what we know about Pierre. I think it's an expansion of us being able to see how he thinks and feels on a lot of these issues and what he would do if you know, he was the prime minister. I mean, this is what he needs to do. He needs to focus on looking like a prime minister, so people can see him in that role and then vote for him for that role. I think the other thing that I really respect about a politician who knows and understands what their swim lane is, you know, he's deliberately choosing locations in the U.S. That are not Washington, D.C., for instance, because he said, you know, Canada only has one prime minister. And so I thought, like, that just to me shows some personal growth and professional growth from him. The other thing that, you know, I would say is he's trying to do, I think, he's trying to carve out something that looks a little different in terms of our relationship with the United States from what Prime Minister Carney's doing. And he also has to do that because he can't agree with Mr. Carney all the time. So he's got to try to differentiate himself a little bit. And listen, you know, the Prime Minister's speech in Davos, people are still talking about it and how that set the tone. And so Pierre has to rise to that challenge and set his own tone.
Karen, the trip includes stops in Michigan, Texas, New York as well, but surprised that there would not be a visit to Washington, D.C. What's your read on the signals being sent there?
Yeah, no, I don't think it would be appropriate for him to visit Washington. He's looking to engage with industry and other stakeholders to establish the benefits to trade, to reduce tariffs, to trade agreements between Canada and the U.S. And the two major industries of automaking and energy, those are very important to Canada's economy as well as to the U.S. economy. It actually warms the cockles of my heart to see both the government and the opposition rowing in the same direction, essentially, and doing things that are very beneficial for Canada, for Canada's relationship, even though with the U.S., even though it's been pretty rocky. But they're focusing on the things that they can control, that they can do something about, and that's how I see this trip. Is Mr. Poilievre has identified something he can do, and he's going forward and doing that on behalf of the country as a representative of the opposition, and I applaud it.
Stacey, for the longest time, the Alberta government sending a steady stream of MLAs, cabinet ministers, the premier occasionally herself, south of the border to make connections, build relations. To your earlier point, is this something Pierre Poilievre could have engaged in a lot earlier?
Yes. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen him engage in that a lot earlier, because it's not like the state of the world that we are living in now just happened overnight. And so there's an element of him maybe being behind on that, right? And so I'm happy to see him stepping forward into that void, that role that he has to show that he actually, can operate internationally and have relationships. Because if he does aspire to the position of prime minister, he needs to know who he's picking up the phone to call. And it is very helpful to have those relationships already established. And so I think he's doing the right things there, and I hope he does continue. I mean, the culture war pieces are what he's known for. And so I would like to see that deepening of what Canadians know about Pierre in a direction that is not the culture wars.
Karen, by taking these trips, having more of a presence on the foreign policy front, what kind of inroads do you now see Pierre Poilievre making with voters as they weigh comparisons with the Prime Minister?
Well, this shows a governance aspect that we haven't seen before. Further to Stacey's point, when Mr. Poilievre engages in a lot of rhetoric that's very heated and is very much us against them, it really alienates a lot of voters. When he squeezes more to the middle, he becomes somebody that people will consider. The rhetoric that's really fiery, but not really based on something that is important to many, many people. Trade is important to many, many people. It really alienates people, and it makes people shy to consider someone like that as someone they want to vote for. I think Prime Minister Carney has changed the tone of things, and that has put Mr. Poilievre on notice that he needs to change his approach, that he can't just keep comparing, contrasting, and saying nasty things about the Prime Minister.
Well, maybe an opportunity now to see if there's an impact on that gap in polling that currently exists. We have to leave it there. We're out of time. Great to see you both. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Nice to see you both, too.
Now, here are a few responses to a recent story posted by CTV News. It's about the province preparing to test a 120-kilometer-an-hour speed limit on a stretch of the QE2 south of Leduc. JP says, can someone please explain to me with logic what the big hurry is? Kingstown thinks still too slow. Average speed on Highway 2 is like 130 to 145 kilometers an hour. Shandi writes they will go at least 40 kilometers an hour faster, just asking for more vehicle crashes and possibly vehicular deaths and injuries. And Jack says, why? There are no cops on the roads giving tickets to those already doing those speeds. Have your say. email us anytime at comments@albertaprimetime.com. Coming up tomorrow, lawyers took to the steps of the legislature this week protesting what they call UCP government attacks on rule of law. We will hear from their lead spokesperson on Friday. Until then, have a great evening, everyone. From all of us at Alberta Primetime, thank you for watching, and join us again next time.